Hello. I'm going to show you how to prep materials for the accordion structures. There's going to be two different structures, the hinged accordion and the nested accordion. For this first part, I'm just going to show you samples of the book or the two books, and then I'm going to go over the materials that you need to gather, and then I'll do the cutting and prepping of all the materials. So there is a handout for this. There's a PDF that is the accordion structures material prep instructions. So that will help guide you. It's probably a good idea to have that either opened up as a PDF while you're prepping or just print out a copy, which is what this is that I'm pointing to right here. This first structure I'm showing you is the hinged accordion with the wrapper covers. This is the with non-adhesive covers. So that's the first one here listed. Hinged accordion with non-adhesive covers. This is a structure created by Heidi Kyle, who's a book artist and a paper folding genius, really. She makes up book structures that are folded structures. And she has a book called The Art of the Fold that if you're interested in looking into, it's a great reference. So this is the hinged accordion. And this is an example that actually has content. So these are long strips of paper that are hinged together. You can kind of see, if you look through, you can see the hinge in the back. And so these are long strips of 5.5 by 17.5 inch long strips that are hinged together. And this has a wrapper cover. It's boards wrapped with interlocking paper. So there's a long sheet and a short sheet that goes around, and that's what we're going to be preparing. And then there's a little piece that is the spine piece. So the way that it goes together is this cover can then, where the long piece goes over, it slides onto the book like that and onto the spine. And so then you can read it like a codex, or you can take that spine out and then open the book up like this. That kind of accordion like that. So that's one of the structures we're going to be prepping materials for. And I'm going to go over that list in just a moment. I'll share my screen for the PDF, but I just wanted to show examples so you can see the book. And then the other one we're going to make is the nested accordion with hardcovers. And so we're also going to make a decorative paper. These two have paste paper, two different paste papers on them. We're going to make a stenciled paper where we're going to use stencils to make a decorative paper instead of making paste paper. So the way this one is, this is an open accordion. So it's like it's not bound at the spine in any way, but there's two different colors of paper and they interlock over each other if you look. So we're going to be cutting 5.5 by 8.5 pieces and then folding the folios together and nesting them together. So that's how that works. And you can see that that's cutouts so that you can see the other side showing through. Okay, so that's the nested accordion. So these are the two that we're going to make. The finished size is 5.5 inches tall by 4.25 inches wide. This is just another one I think I've shown before that has handmade paper, and that's a stenciled decorative paper there. And that's what we're going to make. I'll show you how to do that using the stencils. You really just do it the same way, but I am going to show you how to do a large sheet. So I am going to do a video for that. Okay, let me share my screen so you can see the PDF, and I'm going to go over this. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. So the accordion structure material prep. So for cutting, so what you need is a piece of binder's board, at least 12 inches high by 10 inches wide, and you're going to cut for 5.5 by 4.25 pieces. So if you remember that piece that we cut when we were making the pamphlets, this is the size board that you're going to cut. So don't use this one, but you could use this one to make little tick marks on the board, and I'll show you that when we get to that. to cutting it. But this is the size it's going to be: 5.5 inches tall by 4.25 wide. You need 3 or 4 full sheets of Canson paper. So this is already a piece that's been cut, but this is that Fabriano or Canson paper, that pastel paper. You're going to need 3 or 4 different sheets, and you can have different colors. The main thing you want to consider is, for this book, for the nested accordion, you want to make sure you have at least 2 colors so that you can see how this is constructed, how it's put together. It's best to do that. It doesn't matter what the 2 colors are, but I have a kind of a light and a darker one here, but it's just good to be able to see that structure. So that's the purpose of that. And then you're going to need a sheet of paste paper or other decorative paper to cover the nested accordion. And that's what I was talking about. I'm going to do a video for that, and we will use just a half a sheet. We'll use a half a sheet of Canson to make our decorative paper, because that'll be enough for this project. But then you can make as many as you want. If you get really into making these decorative papers, you could do that. And then you will need 1 full sheet of Mohawk paper to cut 6 sheets for the hinged accordion. So you're going to need one of those big white paper, the text paper. And there's really no way around this. You have to have that size paper, because you have to be able to get the 17.5 inch strip out of it. You can, if you don't have the Mohawk, you can use the Canson paper for that book as well. So it's not going to look like, it's going to look more like this, because it would have color paper in there. So instead of having the white paper here for the hinged accordion, you would cut strips out of that Canson paper or the Fabriano. So you can replace that, but we're going to be cutting 6 sheets, 6 strips out of that Mohawk. So you would have to use probably 1.5 sheets of Canson instead of 1 sheet of Mohawk. But I'm going to assume that you've got Mohawk, and so that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to show how to cut it out of Canson. If you need help with that, it would be the same. I'll talk about the grain direction and different things when I get to where I'm doing that. But if you're in a pinch and you need to use some other kind of paper, you can use the Canson or Fabriano for that part. Okay, so I'm going to just go through this list, and this stuff is going to seem like it's very disconnected, because you can't see it, because you haven't, you don't have it, and you also don't know how it goes together. But just trust me that this is all going to work out. And as we cut pieces, I will talk about the grain, because it's a big part of this structure. It's a big part of really any structure, but this is the first time it's really important that we're conscious of that. Also in the pamphlets, it's important, but I would say this is even more so, because we are going to be gluing the second book. We're going to be gluing when we get to the the nested accordion with the hardcovers. These are actually glued down. Okay, so the boards, for the hinged accordion, so I've got it sorted out by project. We have a hinged accordion with non-adhesive covers. You're going to cut 2 boards that are 5.5 by 4.25. The grain is going to be long on the board. So what that means is, on this piece, the grain is going to be running down the long measurement. And I will go over this again when we get to where we're cutting, and I'll talk about the materials and how you figure out the grain direction, and then how you cut your materials out to match, get your grain direction correct for each piece. So you're going to cut 2 5.5 inches tall, high by 4.25 inches wide, grain long. Then you're going to cut cover paper out of your Fabriano. You're going to cut 2 vertical wrappers. The size is going to be 9 3/8 high and 4.25 inches wide, which is the same width as this board. And when I cut, I'm probably going to use my board to measure. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So you're going to cut 2 strips to that, and that is going to be for these interlocking covers. I talked about the long strip that goes over the back. So that's a tall strip that wraps around. And then you're going to cut 2 horizontal wrappers. So you cut 2, and those pieces go here, the front and back cover. And it'll make sense, just prep everything, and then it'll all make sense. But both of those wrappers both of those pieces, the grain needs to be short because of the way that they're going to fold over the board, and they're not getting glued down. They're just going to interlock. Okay, so that's what you need to do there. And if you just one at a time, and that's what I'm going to do when I demonstrate this, is just one for each item, just kind of go down the list and cut those pieces. Okay, so then we're going to need a spine piece, and that we're going to cut 2 of these so that we can glue it together, and that's going to give you a stiffer spine. And this is made from paste paper. It's just 2 pieces of that Canson glued together, and then it makes it a stiffer spine, and it's easier to manage if it's a little bit thicker. So you're going to cut 2 of those that are 5.5 inches high and 3 inches wide. So it's just a little strip, and you're going to cut 2 of those. And then for your book pages, we're going to cut from the Mohawk sheet 6 sheets. So the height of the sheets is going to be 5.5 inches tall. And then it's a long strip that's like 17, not light, but exactly 17.5 inches wide. So that little addition of the half inch is for the little flap that's going to get glued, and that's the hinge. And that's how they're going to get glued together. So that's why it has to be that little extra half inch, because when you fold down a 17 into 4ths, it's 4.25 inches each. So you can see the little drawing there. It kind of illustrates what it's going to look like. Okay, so that's for book number 1, which is the Hinged Accordion with non-adhesive covers. So then the second book, and this, as we go over this, it sounds like a lot, but it really isn't that much material. They don't really have that many pieces. So the second one is the Nested Accordion with hardcovers. So that is this book. So you're going to cut 2 boards, and again, they're the same size, that 5.5 by 4.25. So when you're doing that this step for the first book, I would go ahead and just cut all 4 of them at the same time. That's what I'll do when I do it, because I know that I need it for both books, and I need 2 boards for each book. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my 4, 2 for one and 2 for the other. Then we're going to need 2 cover papers, and that's going to be your paste paper or your decorative paper. We're not going to have paste paper, but your decorative paper. You're going to cut 2 of those, and they're going to be 7.5 inches tall and 6.25 inches wide. And the grain is going to be long, so the grain is going to follow the long edge, the long cut. And then you're going to cut the pages of the book, 2 different colors of Canson. You need 4 of one color and 5 of another, so there's 9 pages. And you need to cut them 5.5 inches high by 8.5 inches wide. Grain is going to run with the short measurement, because those pages are going to get folded in half and put together. So 5.5 inches high by 8.5 inches wide. So those are the pieces for this book. That's really simple. The other one's simple too. It just has the interlocking covers. That's really the only thing that makes it have a little bit more material to cut. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video and then come back and cut all of these pieces. All right, so we're going to prep the boards first. And I've got these pieces of binder's board. I tried to get some board that matches what you guys probably have. It looks more similar to your stuff than what I usually use. And this is perfectly fine. I just want to make sure that my edges are square. So I have my triangle, and I just want to make sure at least one corner is square. And it looks like it is. If it isn't, I can always trim that and make it square. So make sure you have a square edge. And usually what I do is I'll check it, and then I'll take a pencil and make a little mark at the corner so that I know I have a square edge. But I'm going to cut it right now anyway, so it's not like I'm saving it. So I'm flipping it over so that this is the corner that I made sure was square. And now because I have this little sample piece, I'm going to just use that to transfer my measurements. Now I'm not going to use the board to cut with. I'm actually just going to make tick marks with the edge and then come back and cut it, because I think it's kind of hard to see because they're the same board. So I'm just going to cut here like this. So I just transferred the tick marks, and then I'm going to use my triangle to square up, and I just put my knife into the mark, and then I'm just making sure that everything lines up with the square. What's my other mark? Oh, there it is. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to overcut that because I'm going to use the next one above to cut the other ones. Although I might be able to get 3 out of this. We'll see. Okay, so there's my first 4 1/4. Oh, I didn't talk about the grain direction. I forgot. Let me pull this other board out. So to check for the grain direction, now I want the grain to be long. Okay, so on this board, I can feel the grain. It's very easy to flex in this direction. You can look at that in the straight on shot, not the down. You can see how easy it is to bend, and it's much harder to bend. I mean, I can feel it more than I can see it, but it's hard to bend this way. So that means the grain is running this way or long on this sheet, on this particular sheet. So what a lot of times with things like binder's board, where I know I'm going to be putting things over it, I'm not going to be using the raw board. I'll take a pencil and just lightly make the grain marks on it. And I do this on the back of my book cloth. I usually make a note of a grain on something. I have like a document on my computer with all of the grain directions and stuff for all the materials that I use. But for each piece, I usually check that. And on a lot of commercial papers, not all of them, so you can't just trust this, but a lot of commercial papers, the grain runs long. I found that to be true. And like on 8.5 by 11 paper, the grain is long most of the time. That doesn't mean that it is, so check it. But that's what I found to be true. So on this sheet, if you look at this, I want my grain running long. This is on my little sample, so I'm marking that grain on there. That's what I want, is long, with the long measurement. So if you imagine, because the grain's running long here, I want the grain to be cut out of that right here. So my 5.5 is going to run along the grain, 5.5 here. And then the 4 1/4 is the width. Okay, so that's how I determine it. And you know, a lot of times that's what I tell people to do is imagine laying the piece on the bigger sheet. That is because if you know the grain here, it's like, which way does this need to be going on this piece? And you just match it to that. So since the grain's running long, I need the grain to be long here. I can just do that. So with this, it's easy because we already have a template. Okay, so now I'm going to cut that 4 1/4, and I made 2 tick marks here. So I'm going to just go ahead and rotate, and then I'm going to use my triangle. Just be sure, make sure things are lined up. Yep, looks good. So 4 1/4, and then I'm going to cut, and I'm going to go ahead and cross that line because I'll use that as one of my tick marks for the next bit. You know, so this is somewhat tedious to have to cut each piece like this, but it's very doable. It doesn't take that long. So, you know, this is what we have to do, and that's what we'll just do it. So I'm going to cut 4 of these. So I'll also show doing it with a ruler. So if I need to cut a 4 1/4 wide, I'll just transfer that 4 1/4 with my ruler. Four and a quarter. And then this way, 5.5. I already have one 5.5 there, which is my over when I cut over. So I'm just going to use that as one of my marks. And again, I just put my knife into one of the marks and then come back, use my triangle to square it up. Ducking down a little bit. Keep losing my spot. Square this up. And then cut. And just try to not to slide, you know, hold it in place. When I can feel the mat is when I stop, because it's usually like 4 or 5 cuts. And then in this direction, you can really kind of push down and use the edge of the cut I just made to square it. There's 2, and now I'll just go ahead and do, so I already have some cuts for the next 2 that I'm gonna get out of this piece. So I'm gonna go ahead and just measure that 5.5 inch. And I could also use this, but you just, if you do decide to use the template to transfer, just make sure you're always real straight with it, because it's very easy to just kind of slap it on there. And for this, we actually are using the edges as one of our straight edges. So it's not like you're just putting this on something and trimming out all, you know, four edges and making it square. We're actually using the board, one of these, as the straight edge. So you do have to be careful if you're going to do it that way. I just use tick marks so much that I just kind of get used to doing this. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and put both of these 5.5s on here. And I'll go ahead and cut that first. And then I'm not even going to worry about that because I measured off both here and there. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut the top of this board off. Just cut all the way across. Okay, that's a little scrap. And then 4 1/4. And I've already got one mark down here, so I'm gonna make the other one up here. 4 1/4. Just be conscious of what you're doing, and then I'll make the other one over here. From that pencil mark, I'll just come over 4 1/4. Just make sure you're not actually accidentally doing halves and things like that. Make sure you're making the right mark. This is the last one. So now I've got the boards cut for both of them because they're the same size. Okay, here's a scrap piece, and here's my 4 boards. And I'm still going to hold on to this template because I just feel like that's a good template for this class to have the whole time. There's other times we're going to need this when we're prepping text blocks for the multi-section flat back and different things. We'll need this, so hold on to that. That's why I marked it with the measurement on there so that I won't accidentally use it for something. So now I can set that to the side. Okay, so the boards are cut, and now we're going to cut the cover paper. So I'm going to pause the video, come back with the Canson and Fabriano to do those cuts. All right, so for this, I need, looking at my sheet, I need the cover papers for the non-adhesive covers. So I need to cut 2 vertical wrappers and 2 horizontal wrappers. So I want the grain short on both of those. So the first one is 9 3/8 high by 4 1/4 wide. So the grain is going to run with the 4 1/4. So if you look at that book, the vertical wrapper is on the inside of the book. The horizontal wrapper is on the outside of the book. Let me just pull one where you can really see that. So for example, this one, this is the short one. It's short and wide, and it wraps around like that. The interior is the long one. So that's the 9 3/8 by 4 1/4 wide. Okay, so just be aware of that. This is the first one you're making. It's not that big of a deal. It's not the one that you're going to show or turn in. So it's not that important, but it's something to be aware of. So let me get these boards out of my way that I've already prepped. Just set those to the side. So this is the vertical wrapper. This is going to be the inside of the book, and I think I want that to be this yellow kind of ivory paper. So I'm going to set the gray one to the side, but I need to make sure I know what the grain direction is. And this is a full sheet of Canson, and I'm just going to check the grain. So you might have to watch kind of both frames here, because I'm going to check it. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to just kind of gently roll it and see which direction. So I'm just bouncing. You can see my hands kind of bouncing on the sheet. This is pretty easy. It feels easy. And whichever way is easiest to bend gently, not fold, but to just gently bend, is the direction of the grain. So this is the long sheet here. So I check it this way and then flatten it back out and roll it the other direction. This is where the little sticker is. And this is much bouncier, like it's much more open. If you look inside, like it just doesn't want to flex. And that's because the grain runs long on this sheet. So it's just much easier, if you look at it in this direction, much easier to curl or to fold. I'm not folding it, but just bending it that way. So that means that the grain direction runs with the long measurement of the sheet. So the grain's running like this. Now for this, I don't want to mark it because I want to make sure, because I'm using this as my cover, I don't want to mark on this. So I'm just double checking it. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to feel, but like I said, commercial papers. This is a Fabriano paper. The grain runs long. So the grain is running like this down the sheet. That means I want the grain is going to run with the short measurement. So that means I want the 4 1/4 right here, because this is the grain of the sheet, this full way. I want that 4 1/4 here, and I want my 9 3/8 this way. And that way, when I cut that out, the grain is going to be running with the short. Okay, so long grain, and I want my little piece out of this right here. And that's going to run with the short direction. Okay, so all I'm going to do is I need 2 of those. So I'm just going to measure using the tick marks. I could also use my little, and actually I do this a lot. I will just use this to make my tick mark. So I'll just, then I move it down. Gentle tick mark. So that's that. And then I'll cut my 9, or measure, I have to measure that because I don't have anything for that one. 9 3/8. Oh, that works. This is great because now I can get both of these out of this. Yep. So I'm going to do that. Because my grain's running like this, I need the 4 1/4 this way. I can get 2 strips out of that full sheet. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to, because I took the first measurement from that board, I'm going to do the second one as well. The pieces underneath, and then so then I'm just going to just line this up to the edge and make a tick mark here, and then line it up to the bottom here. And when I'm putting my pencil in against the board, I'm really getting it down like into the groove there. Like I'm not going straight down like this. I'm kind of pointing my pencil in because I want it right up next to that, right up next to the board, so it's the correct width. So just whatever you do, just make sure you do it consistently. So now I'm going to cut this strip off, and then I'm going to cut that 9 3/8 after I cut the strip. So knife, not my pencil. This is sort of hard to do because it's a long, and I don't have a ruler that's as long as this. So I'm finding 2 of those tick marks, and then I'm just going to cut. And this one I am using that cork back ruler to hold it because I've got to go a long distance. And I'm not going to try to go all the way to the end. I'm going to stop little more than halfway across. And I'm gonna move. Didn't cut all the way through. Oh well. I'm gonna put my knife into the cut and then line it back up again. I'll do the second cut and then go back and do the first one. Not quite lined up. Okay, gotta go back because I didn't push hard enough and didn't go all the way through. So I'll put my knife into the paper again, line it up again. And cut. Push, give it a little more pressure. So there we go. Okay, so there's my strip. That's 4 1/4. Now I can move this out of the way and then do that 9 3/8 on both of them. So just measure another tick mark, because I only did one because I got super excited when I realized, oh, I can get 2 out of this strip. How fun. 9 3/8. And then from that mark, I'll just measure another 9 3/8. And so that measurement, I'll tell you, is about not doubling up when you overlap the board. And you really don't want them to touch. So if you think about it, we've got a board that's 5 1/2, and we don't want anything that wraps over this to interlock or touch in the back. So 9 3/8 is going to keep it like this far apart. And that's what we want. We don't want it to start interacting underneath. So that's why 9 3/8, but really it's a little bit random. You could do something else. Sometimes I kind of just eyeball it because this is going to stay on as the cover. So, and if you see a pencil mark, I'm not too worried about that either because it's going to get tucked into the fold. So, okay. So there's my 2 vertical wrappers. Now I'll just add that to my little stack of supplies. And then I'm going to cut 2 horizontal wrappers. So I'm going to cut that from that gray sheet. So this sheet is not a full sheet. So I really do have to check the grain on this because I don't know which direction this is. So for this one, I want the grain to be in the short direction. So the 5 1/2 inches high is going to be where the grain goes. So check that. This does not feel like it. It feels very open. So I think the grain is this. Yep. Much easier. I can tell it wants to be folded in this direction. So that's the grain. And I'm going to turn it so that I'm working with the grain running like this to me, because then I know I need to do my 5 1/2 here because I want it to follow the short measurement, which is the 5 1/2. And then I'm going to cut the 8 1/2 inches wide here. Okay. So then I'm just going to do what we just did. I could use the board, but I think, you know, I got my ruler going. I'm just going to do it with the ruler. So 5 1/2. So I just need 2 of these. And sometimes what I'll do with the ruler, you guys can't see what I'm doing, is I will use the 6 1/2 so that I can make a tick mark at the 1 inch mark instead of the end of the ruler, because this particular ruler, the measurement goes all the way to the end, which I love a lot of times, but when I'm actually trying to make a tick mark, it's not the best because I could go outside, inside. It's not as distinct where I'm supposed to make my mark. So that's why sometimes when I'm measuring, I will use the 6 1/2 and then use the 1 inch mark so I can make my mark. The only thing about that is you just got to be real conscious about what you're doing. 6 1/2 to 1. And I went ahead and made 2 tick marks here because I can get both of these out of this strip. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make one more measurement just as a little fail safe to make sure I'm making it at the right point. And again, this is that long piece. So I have to do it in little sections. So I'm going to line it up. I'm actually going to line up the first and last mark that I made, and then double check that that one is in there. It seems like it's right underneath. Yeah, it's right there. Okay, so then I just hold it, and I'm going to cut a little more than halfway across. And then I have to push my paper, pull the ruler down a little bit. And I've got that second tick mark. And then I can use the cut to line up. And I just double check that it feels like it's going to be smooth, like it's not jumping up or down. And then I go ahead and make the cut. Okay. So now I just have to cut that 8 1/4. I mean, is that right? 8 1/2. 8 1/2. So I could also, at this point, I could use my mat. So if I start there, I could just find the 8 1/2 and cut. You know, do that. So I'm going to do for it. So there's different ways of measuring. As long as you keep it consistent with the cuts, it really should be fine. And again, we're doing our best. You know, it might not be perfect, but it'll be fine. All right, 8 1/2. Oh, now look, that's cute. Because this little piece could be my spine piece because it's the right height, 5 1/2. And then I just need to cut another one just like it. And I could either cut it out of this or I could put that yellow on the back, which is what I'm going to do. Because it just needs to be about 3 inches. And this is a little bit larger than 3, if you look here. But you know, that's okay. At least 3, that's what we want. So because this is already ready, I'm going to use that as my first piece. So these two are ready. These are the 5 1/2 by 8 1/2. And those two are the wrappers for the cover. So that's the horizontal wrapper done. And so now I'm going to use this piece to make my other spine piece. So that's the next thing in the list is the spine piece. And I'm just going to take that yellow sheet. Now I do want to make sure I'm doing the right grain direction here because the grain direction on this piece should be long. So it needs to follow that 5 1/2, needs to go with the 5 1/2. So since I already cut off of this sheet, I just want to make sure I know the grain direction. Okay, so it's this way here. That's the piece I want here. And, you know, I'm not going to worry about this because we're going to glue it together when we're making the book. And then I will probably trim it a little bit. So it's actually probably good that that's more than 3. But even if it wasn't, I could still make it like 2 7/8 or whatever. I just want to clean up the edges because when you glue stuff that's the same size together, it can get a little off and not be square, but we're going to make that happen. So for this, I mean, honestly, I could just cut. Yeah, it's too hard to do. So I'm just going to use this as my little bit of measurement and make my tick marks. Just 2 tick marks. Like that. And then cut that. And I'm really just going to use the tick marks and not worry about squaring it up because, like I said, we're going to cut this. I do want to stop at the marks because I don't want to waste paper here. So I'm just looking for this top mark and try to stop about there. Technicality you don't have to do. I went past it a little bit. It's okay. Okay. Now I've got these 2 pieces. There's 2 ready to go. So now we've got to do the last step, which is the most difficult really, is the mohawk. So that's cutting those 17.5 by 5.5 inch strips from the large sheet of paper. So I'm gonna go get that and bring it, and then I'll just show you how to do those one by one. I may not do all of them. I'll probably do 2 or 3 of them. There's 6, and it's gonna take some time. So I'll probably just demo 2 or 3 of them and then let you guys do it and come back to do the next cuts. So pause the video for a moment and go grab that paper. Okay, so this is the large sheet of mohawk, and we're going to be cutting it. We're going to be cutting 6 pieces. To make this a little bit more manageable, I think you can cut this piece in half. If you don't want to do that, you can skip it, but because we're cutting 3 and 3, we can do this. I mean, I don't know if you guys have this issue of space. I find it a little difficult to work on this big sheet of paper. So that's, I mean, we tear down for the pamphlets, but for this, I usually don't, but because it's just, I tear this in half. And if I can find my knife. I'm just going to tear this just to make it a little more manageable. So I can do these 3. Oh, now start to do it before I talk about it. But this sheet, the grain runs long. And for these pieces to be short, meaning that it's going to follow that 5.5. So I'm going to cut 5.5, 5.5, 5.5 out of these 2 pieces. So there'll be 6. But because the grain runs this way on that, this is the folded sheet, a long sheet like that, the grain runs long like that. I'm going to be cutting my 5.5s, you know, off of the short end up 5.5 because that's the grain. Okay. So let me just go ahead and finish tearing that. Okay. Now I can do them one at a time instead of that big old sheet. Okay. I don't want that torn edge. I want the straight edge. So I can put my knife down, make sure my X-Acto is nearby. I need my pencil. And I'm going to measure up 5.5, 5.5. Oop, not on this way. 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Okay. Because the grain runs this way. So I'm going to be cutting my, this is so hard to show because this is the short end of the sheet where I'm going to measure up 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, the short end of the full sheet. So I got to stand up because this is such a big piece. But we only need 17.5 ultimately. Maybe we should cut that first because the width of this is way more than we need. It's like 25 inches wide. You look at that, and we only need 17.5. So I could go ahead and cut that. This is where having either a big mat, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make my cuts at the 17.5 because that way I can get it. It's just more manageable. So for this, what I'm doing is I'm putting it at 0 on my, you can't see my full cutting mat. I'm using the cutting mat to do this, 0, or I could use a ruler. And this is where you need that 18-inch ruler. If you got that, it's going to help you a lot because otherwise you're going to have to measure 12 plus 5.5 to get to that width. And you can do it. It's just, it's a pain a little bit. So I'll do it with the ruler. So from the edge of the paper, and I've got the 18, I'm just going to do a 1/2 inch away. So I've got to duck my head under the camera here for a second. 17.5, sorry to get in the way a bit. And then $17.5. And I just made 2 marks that I'm then just going to connect and cut. So again, this is taller than my ruler. but I'm going to go ahead and just put my knife in one of the marks, slide it up, and then find the other one. It looks crooked. Before I do it, I'm going to check it because I feel like something's not right and it could easily be incorrect. So I'm going to double check that. This top one's right. This one might be off. Just make sure you're paying attention to what you're doing every time. They look right, so I don't know. Maybe it just looked crooked. Maybe it's casting a shadow. I don't know. All right, so this time I'm just lining up those two pieces. And I'm gonna cut. So I can't get all the way down, so I'll do a little more than half. This is very easy to cut through because it's text weight. So then I just pull it, line it up again. I kind of got off the measurement a little bit. Oh, well. And then complete that cut. So then that's the scrap piece. And now, so now the width is cut. So the 17.5 is cut, and now I'm going to do this 5.5. I think this is my torn edge. So I'm going to flip that over, get to my cut edge. I started measuring on the wrong end of the sheet. 5.5. 5.5. I'm going to go ahead and put all the measurements on at once. So 2 tick marks at each section. So 5.5. So then I'll measure up from that mark. 5.5. And then I can do the next one. 5.5. And then go back to the top here. Measure up. This time I am using the end of the ruler, 5.5. And 5.5. So my suggestion for this would just be careful about the orientation of the paper, because when I cut that 17.5, it looked very square and it was confusing me. So just be aware of what, stay awake during it and stay aware of what you're doing. 5.5. That's 1. 5.5. And I'm letting my ruler kind of hang off the top because it's 18. I can do it in one cut. Make sure you use enough pressure because I'm having a tendency, maybe I need to change my blade too, because I'm not cutting all the way through, or it feels like almost not cutting all the way through. So here's my last cut. You shouldn't have to like hurt your finger to cut though. So if you're having to bend your finger way back, you need to change your blade. Okay, so there's the first 3 from that section. There's a little tick mark, I can see. So I can always just erase that off. And again, this is our mock-up anyway. Not our mock-up, but our first book. Pencil marks come right off, so no problem. Okay, so that's the 3, and then I'm going to cut 3 more, and then you will have all of your pieces. So I'm going to go over the pieces. You'll have 6 of these. Okay, I'm just not showing that. When I make the book, you'll see all the pieces, but I just want to make sure you understand. You need 6 of these strips, whether you use the Mohawk or the Canson. You need rest of your pieces. So you have the spine piece, 2 of those, and you can do 2 color like this if you'd like. That's up to you. You need the horizontal wrappers. You need 2 of those, 5.5 by 8.5. You need 2 vertical wrappers, 4 1/4 by 9 3/8, and you need 2 boards, 5 1/2 by 4 1/4. So those will be your pieces for the hinged accordion. 6 sheets. Don't forget 6 sheets of the text paper. Okay, so now I'll do the prep for the other book for the nested accordion. And then we'll have a stack of supplies, and then I'll do 2 separate videos, one for each book to put it together. Okay, all right, I'm going to pause, come back and cut the rest. All right, so what we have left is we've already cut our boards. We're doing the nested accordion now. We've got a few more pieces to cut. It's not that much. We've already got our boards cut because we cut all 4 at once. Now we just need to cut the cover paper and the book pages. So that's all going to be, I'm going to cut it from a plain sheet. I'm going to cut the covers from a plain sheet, but then I am going to do a video about making decorative paper with stencils. And I will end up using that when I make the book. I'll probably use that decorative paper because it's going to look prettier. But I don't have it made yet, so I'm going to go ahead and just cut it from a normal sheet or from a regular sheet. So for the cover paper, I'm going to use that gray paper that I had. And again, we just got to be aware of the grain. This is going to be a size that's 7 1/2 inches high and 6 1/4 inches wide. So let me just check my grain. I think it's this in this remaining sheet. And then this is against the grain. So this is the grain. I'm going to cut it so that the grain's running like this. And I want the 7 1/2 to go right here. So I will measure that 7 1/2. And I'm going to put them side by side. So I'm just going to make 2 tick marks, one here and one a little bit further down the sheet. That's my 2 tick marks for the 7 1/2. And then the width is 6 1/4. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Put this on here. 6 1/4 and 6 1/4. And I could also make these pieces decorative as well if I wanted to. I could stencil onto these sheets, and I might do that. But I want to show you making a full decorative paper sheet as well. Okay, so I'm going to cut that 7 1/2 height. So I just put my my knife in the pencil mark. Then line it up. And then I'm just looking at where the tick marks are here, and I'm just going to kind of go maybe a little past that and then pull straight. Couple of passes just to be sure that I'm going through. And then I just cut my 6 1/4 pieces. So these are my 2 cover sheets for that book, for the nested. And really you could use either cover style on either one of these books. Okay. That's it. Okay, so there's the cover pieces. Just 2. And then I have my 2 boards, and I'm going to set these to the side. And this is where I can stamp or stencil onto the covers to make that decorative. And then I need to cut the book pages. So I need 2 different colors of Canson, and I'm going to cut 4 of one color and 5 of the other one. So let me step over. I don't have to go very far, so I'm just going to step off and get this. Dog's barking. Okay, again, I'm just going to check that grain. So the grain is running like this on this sheet because this is not a full sheet. So I'm going to cut my 4 out of this one because it's the smaller one. And these are both 5 1/2 inches high and 8 1/2 inches wide. So my grain is running like this. So I'm going to cut my 5 1/2 this way. wrong thing. These feel the same. 5.5, and I'm going to go ahead and do 11 because that's another 5.5. And I'll do it further up here at 11 and at 5.5. Okay, and then I'm going to measure my 8.5. So that's 8.5 and then 17. And I can go up here higher on the sheet and do 8.5 and 17. Right. Again, I'm not gonna be able to connect in one cut. Put my knife in here. And here for these second cuts, I'm going to use the triangle because I disconnected my cuts. Oh, where did I put it? Triangle. Oh, here it is. There we go. So there's 2 cut and then this one. That's the 4. And I will pause the recording, come back and do the 5, and then go over all the materials. There's 4 of one color, and then I'll grab the other sheet and do the 5. All right, here's the last 5. So this is the same process. Just going to transfer that 5.5. And so this is a full sheet of Kansas or Fabriano paper. So the grain is running long on that sheet. And I'm just going to talk about this every time because it's confusing to people. This is the opposite of the grain direction. It's the side that's not flexible, as flexible. This is very easy to roll and very easy to bounce. So this is the grain running long. I need my height to match the grain. And so it's the 5.5. The 8.5 is going to go this way. 5.5 from the short end of the sheet. So I just measure up. And I can get easily 6 out of this sheet. I think yeah. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll cut 6, probably because it's going to make it simpler. Okay, so then 5.5. and 5.5. Oops, I didn't know I need to do that. I was doing the 11 and I forgot about how to do that. I'll just cut one more anyway. So I'll do 5.5 here, and I'll go up to 11 here. Make a tick mark. And then I'll start here at this tick mark, measure up 5.5, and go to 11 here. And these stickers, just be real gentle, but they usually come off very easily. They don't really leave a mark or anything. I'm just going to go ahead and just cut the height right now, because I feel like I kind of messed up. That's why I had to use that triangle previous time with the other color. So for this, the height. I'm just going all the way across the sheet. I'll just pull it down and line it up again. And then put the blade in the already cut part, and then line it up. It should go. There's one. Oh, a couple of spots too light. I do need to change this blade. Good to see if I have any of my blades out. See, I'm gonna try to get by, but I need to change my blade. I don't like doing that, but I gotta keep going. Okay, continue. I need to use a little more pressure than I like. The blade's getting dull. You just don't want it to tear. It can also tear a sheet, but since this paper is so thick, relatively thick, it'll work. Okay, down. Second cut. Okay. So there's the height cut, and now I cut the 8.5. And here again, I could use a cutting mat to do that. I'll speed it up a little bit. So I'm starting at 2, so that's going to be 10.5. I mean, you know, I just kind of do stuff like that all the time. Starting at 2, so 8.5 is going to be 10.5. Okay. 2. Starting at 1 this time. So it'll be 9.5. Again, just stay conscious about what you're doing. Change whatever you want to change. You just have to be aware that you're doing it. Oh, one more. Might just hold on to that piece, not cut another one. And I might use it on our next project when we get to it, when we do the tunnel book. Still use that piece. It's the same height, I believe. Pretty sure. So I started at 1, so I'm going to do 9.5 here. And that's going to be my last piece, I think. So I'll just hold on to these pieces. These are scraps. I could also make my spine for the other book if I wanted to out of these two, you know, because they're about the same size as that offcut we made before. It's a little less than 3, but that would be perfectly fine as well. If you like that color, you want to use that to glue together. Okay, so let's go over these pieces. We have the text pages here. We have the cover sheets, and we have our boards. This is the whole stack of 4, but we're going to have 2 for this book, 2 for the other book. So 2 5.5 tall by 4 1/4 inch boards. We have the covers for those. Now, really what you need for this is it just needs to be bigger than the board. You just need to leave about 3/4 of an inch all the way around for this, but I made it the size a little bit bigger. So that's, the board's going to get covered. We're going to glue and cover this. 2 cover sheets, 2 cover pages. And then we have 5 of one color for the interior pages, for the folios. We have 5 of this kind of light green. And then we have 4 of the other color, green. Okay. So this is your stack for the second book. Okay, so that's all your materials cut. Just keep up with that little checklist. That little sheet has all the measurements on it, the grain direction and all of that stuff. And then just refer to that and then go along with the video to prep your materials, and you'll have your stuff ready to make both of these books. I'm going to make 2 separate videos for the book structures, and then I'm also going to make a video for making a decorative paper, stenciled paper. All right. Okay. See you next time. Bye.